Hey there, guys. Welcome back. So, I know that it is a holiday weekend. It is very likely that people are out doing whatever, but maybe some people will show up. So, what we're going to be talking about today is I don't know how many more of these I'm going to do because this will be plenty to get you started. This is a free certification to teach a basic 5-element theory and exercises in Thunder Shamanism. So if you're unfamiliar with this series, the free certification series, or if you're just new to my channel at all, and of course if you're watching this after it's been archived, go back and watch it from the beginning. Watch the first certification video and start from there. The idea is that I've been teaching for a long time. I come onto YouTube and I say a lot of stuff on YouTube. I've got more than a handful of Master Shamanism students at thunderwizard.com, and many of them have indicated that they want to do more to help with this teaching. That a lot of people, a lot of students have shared with me that they feel that it's really important that this teaching really gain traction. And so I thought, what better way to do that than to allow you, if what you want to do is help spread the word of this this teaching, go ahead and teach it for free. You know, a lot of lineages and a lot of teachers will, you know, and I kind of never really understood this, but they've, you know, you have to get certifications. You know, in the old school, the way I did it, you know, yeah, you had to get permission from the teacher to teach, but when I see these widespread certifications, you know, a lot of these people, you know, bottom line is that it's just a way for teachers to make money a lot of times. Sure, you with some things like, you know, hands-on work and healing and you know, massage and acupuncture and that kind of stuff, yeah, you need to be certified for sure. So I'm not trying to downplay all of that, but when it comes to a lot of the spiritual practices, I've seen this being abused, and there's a lot of people with certifications in my experience who don't really know what they're doing. You know, they went for a seminar and paid for a weekend and they got a certification. So look, in the old school way, that's not how we did things. You became apprentices, and while you were apprenticing, you would usually teach the people that were coming in beneath you, and the teacher would kind of watch to make sure everything was happening. By the way, this July 2nd? I think it's July 2nd. Anyway, I live in a neighborhood where they like to do a lot of fireworks, so if you hear something that sounds like, you know, I'm in the middle of some kind of a war zone, don't worry, it's just people who like to light firecrackers and stuff. So anyway, so if I jump out of my seat, it just means that there's fireworks going on. Anyway, so as I said, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of people on tonight, and that's okay. What I want to do is just make sure that you have the tools necessary to teach. So the idea is I'm not necessarily expecting anybody who's going to use this information to be experts or to memorize stuff. So as you'll notice, if you scroll down to the bottom, you will see that I have a playlist, and the playlist for this one is just simply entitled 5 Elements. So what you can do to really get the specifics of how to teach an introductory course in 5-element shamanism is just watch those. And if you're not comfortable teaching but you want to do something to help spread the teaching, you can create a study group, invite people over and say, let's watch the videos, and then you guys can practice, because in that playlist there are plenty of exercises in there for you to do, and so you can practice with the exercises. And you know, when it comes to 5 elements, I've done my best to make sure that whatever I'm teaching is, number one, going to be practical, that you're going to get something out of it and get a personal experience from it. and that it's user friendly. So there's all kinds of stuff, once you start getting into energy work, that you do have to be careful with at some point, because if you make mistakes, you can cause yourself harm. That is also true with 5 elements. I know, because I've done it. I've experimented beyond. I've broken the rules, and I ended up hurting myself. And so that's just the way I've always been. So I recommend that when I give you a specific technique, a specific instruction on how to deal with the elements, that you follow my instruction, because otherwise you might you might hurt yourself. At the very least, you might be at cross purposes with yourself. So we're going to talk a little bit about the creation of the universe and the 5 elements, because again, if you want to teach a class, you just start throwing out the 5 elements. That's fine, nothing wrong with that. But I find, again, Westerners need to have their intellect stimulated. So the intellect likes creation stories. And so I'm going to share with you how the creation of the universe has come about in connection to the 5 elements. So this is live, so I am happy to take questions. If you guys aren't out partying for the weekend or whatever, and you actually are at home and watching this, I will take some questions. If you're new to the channel, the best way to work with me is to ask me a question. If you come on here and dump your opinion on something, it might be right, and lots of times I agree with people who do that. But many times if I disagree, then that gives me an opportunity to pick apart what you say, because I want to be accurate, and it'll help me to teach something. But it's not, you might get your feelings hurt if I do that. So the best way to find out about something is to ask me, and then I can give you my opinion, and then take it from there. So let's see here. I'm just going to check and see if there's anybody online watching. And no, there's nobody on. Now, of course not. Why should there be? You guys should be out. Unlike me, you should be out enjoying your life. So I am going to then just go begin with the teaching. Okay? So here we go. The 5 elements in terms of creation. So you may be wondering, where did the 5 elements come from? How do they fit into the creation of the universe? So I'm not going to go into the specifics of my syncretic view and where I got all this information. At some point, if you want, I can go into that. But suffice it to say that my work in multiple traditions has given me an understanding about this science. And again, before I go any further, I should say that when we're talking about the 5 elements, we are talking about a science. My little thing keeps beeping red and yellow, so if I cut out, my apologies. But so far so good. Yeah, it's a weekend. A lot of people are on the internet. So the 5 elements are a science, and we don't have. There's no argument or discussion from people who have worked with elemental energies in traditions that have an unbroken connection into prehistory. In some of the newer ones, especially in Western New Age or Western magic, or these kinds of things, there is all kinds of discussion about what the elements are. And again, if this is a science, the elements should follow certain rules. It's not up for debate or negotiation. So my hope is that I can give you a personal experience with the elements, so that you can see that they do exist. It's not just something that we think about. A lot of in my experience, a lot of the Western stuff, when they deal with elements, I don't know necessarily that they're dealing with elements. I think that they're imposing experiences onto things, and it doesn't mean things don't happen. It's just, you can impose. You can impose your agenda onto something and have an experience with it. But as I said, in my experience, a lot of times some of the Western stuff it just takes a lot of work. Whereas if you just stick with traditions that have an unbroken connection into prehistory, then you're going to find that these are tried and true, and they are very user friendly for the most part, and that they work very well. You don't have to force it to make it work. Again, that's my thing with Western magic, is you got to force it to make it to work a lot of times. So this stuff, it's more like you're just opening a door and discovering what's already there. So bottom line of that is that this is not just my idea. I'm not just deciding to throw around here my ideas of the elements as opposed to somebody else. This is found in multiple traditions, and I talk about this in the playlist, in those videos. I go into some detail, and in the books I go into some details about how this is a science and where you can find it, this same science all over the world. But let's talk about first the creation of the universe. You want to call it the manifestation of the universe, the evolution of the universe, I don't really care. So let's see if I have my little thing here that says where the elements came from and how they came into being. I think I have this here. So for those of you who are wanting to use this to teach a class, you can take a screenshot of this or whatever, and or make notes of it. But this is how I have found in multiple traditions how not only the universe was created from the perspective of the elements, but where the elements came from. So we have in the beginning, actually what I didn't put in there is that we start with nothing. From nothing, which we would call Gunungagap in the northern tradition, which means yawning chasm. So let's talk about nothing for a second, because nothing doesn't mean nothing like we think of it, no thing. Nothing means pure unmanifested potential. So it's actually the most powerful of all of the states. As you get further into manifestation, things start to, I'm not going to say lose their power, it's that their power gets more locked up. It's like, nuclear power. The way you got nuclear bombs, I'm assuming, I'm not a physicist, is, to split the atom. There's that power already packed in there, and you're just releasing what's already, the potential energy that's within that atom. So that's the idea. This is potential energy that has not manifested, and so even though we call it nothing, it really is very concentrated everything. And one of the words that really took me to this place when I started coming up creating the Thunder Path, specifically connecting it to my ancestral tradition, was when I looked at the Naut rune, what we call the Nauthi's rune, but the other word is Naut, N-A-U-G-H-T. Naut, Naucht, comes from two words. Na, which is the negation, N-A, and then Wicht, W-I-G-H-T. We pronounce it white, but it's actually Wicht. Nawicht, Naucht, Naut. Nauwicht means no spirit. As you know, white is an older term for nature spirit. The whites, the nature whites. But wicht means spirit, and nawicht means without spirit. So if we look at the term of spirit having to do, again from the shamanic standpoint, as having a consciousness, personality, and awareness, nawicht means without awareness, without consciousness. And so no spirit, no life. But as you know, just because something doesn't have consciousness or awareness, if we're talking about the beginning of things, we're talking about the emptiness from which everything came, then it's not going to have consciousness. Consciousness comes from being individualized. But when this whole of pure potential of pure emptiness. There's no reason for that. Because in order for consciousness to exist, it has to relate to something else. It has to relate to something outside of it. So if there's nothing else to relate to, there is no consciousness. Okay, so nawicht, not, nothingness. From nothingness, we get the one. So that is just as mysterious as anything else. The nothingness of that, the one that just comes out of nothingness. I'm not sure I have the capacity to explain that, so I won't even try. But again, we've got from nothingness comes the one. From the one comes the two. That in the northern tradition we see in the Norse mythology, creation mythology. Things were created from Ginnungagap when a spark from the fire world in the south and a drop of water from the mist world in the north met in the center. When that fire and water connected, boom. That's where all life came from. So there's no coincidence that if we compare that to the Taoist tradition, where it says that from the one came the two, meaning yin and yang, male and female. However you want to look at it. Male and female have that symbology connected to it as well. Male is fire and female is water, generally speaking. And so there's no coincidence. The Norse saw it in one way, they saw it in a very elemental way, and in my experience, the tribal Germanic people were very poetic in the way that they did things. Whereas in my experience, at least of the Taoist perspective, when they dealt with myths, it was more of a very practical nature, very down-to-earth, practical kind of a thing. So they're going to look at it as male and female, yin and yang, whereas the Germanics are going to see it as fire and water. They're going to give it make it a lot more vibrant and poetic, because that's just their genetic, emotional mindset. And it also, while I'm on the subject, I've also experienced that when I've worked with teachers, and I'm talking about ascended teachers from other traditions. The Taoist masters, the ascended masters, the spiritual teachers, when they come and work with you, you can feel their depth, you can feel their profundity, but they're just very mute. They're really only interested in giving you the information that you need. And if you don't have the right kind of respect, they just disappear. They don't say anything. Same is true in my experience, with a lot of the Taoist teachers, not all of them, but a lot of them. If you had the right amount of respect and deference, then they could teach you. But if you didn't, they would either teach you wrong, because they weren't about yelling and screaming or calling you names or saying get it together. Some of them did, but most of the time they would just kind of nod their head if you were off base, and they would say, oh yeah, that's great, and they'd walk away. Or they would just turn around and walk away and not talk to you. Whereas in my experience, when I've worked with the ascended masters of my ethnic tradition, these are very much more fiery. That's when you get a lot of fiery interaction, a lot of more direct interaction, and so we get to see at least some of the cultural mindsets that are different. Anyway, that was a nice little sidetrack. So let's get back. We're talking about creation again. Last I saw, there was a few people that are listening. So again, we're talking about creation in the elements, and I want you to take note of this little blurb right here, because this is how creation came to be. So from nothingness comes the one, from the one comes the two, from the two comes the three. The three is the third, what we call three dimensions. And this is everywhere. This is, even in Christianity, you got Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In modern times, you have mind, body, and spirit. Taoism, you have heaven, earth, and human beings. In the Norse tradition, you have Odin, Vili, and Ve. And so this corresponds with the three. So in the human body, you have the three ones. The three ones correspond with the three energy cauldrons, not chakras. Those are different. The energy cauldrons, which are heaven, or Odin, which would be up here in the third eye. Vili, or willpower, which would be the navel. I've got my hands covering my navel. And then Ve, which is the heart center, which means spirit or space, sacred space. So Odin, Vili, and Ve, heaven, earth, and man. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. I don't care. There's, listen, by the way, the Trinity, interesting footnote, the Trinity cannot be found in either the Old or the New Testament. The Trinity was imposed onto Christianity by the Europeans, the Catholic Church, because the ancient shamanic European tradition saw things in threes. You have Odin, Vili, and Ve in the northern tradition, and I'm sure there are others. Like I said, the Taoists have it, the three ones, heaven, earth, and man. So this is part of the science of the fabric of the universe. And so even the Christians, as they're destroying, as they go through and destroy all of the old shamanic understandings, they could not, even inside themselves, get rid of this idea of the Trinity. So we have emptiness becomes the one becomes the two become the three. Now here's something interesting, because before we get into the next part, in the Norse tradition we have, as the universe is being created, we have the giant Ymir, which is believed to come from the word yemos, which means twin. And it is, I can't remember exactly, but it even says in the myth that he had his feet mate with each other, which means that within him was male and female, the yin and the yang. And so there we have the one, which becomes yemos, becomes two, which would be the giant Ymir. And then we have the two become three. In the Norse tradition, Odin, Vili, and Ve, which would be, how can I put this? It would be perception, willpower, and spirit. I don't know how you want to look at it. Those three dimensions then tear Ymir to pieces, and use his body to create the universe. What this means is that the three in the body are used to differentiate reality, because without it, we wouldn't be able to experience three-dimensional reality. We need to perceive it. As we've talked about before, there are, two very famous physics experiments that say on the subatomic level that reality is a result, or how reality manifests is a result of the intention of the observer, which is what we're saying here. That observation and perception is what tears these, this dualist part of the universe and turns it into everything. So we have that already in the myth, and so we have nothing becomes the one becomes the two become the three, and the three become five. So the five is the five elements. So let's talk about that, because that's what this is really about, the five elements. So we have the five elements in most traditions around the world would be something like ether, air, fire, water, and earth. So if you're using this to teach, go ahead and make a screenshot of this or take a note of this. For those of you who are familiar with the Taoist, the Chinese tradition, ether is equivalent to wood, air is equivalent to metal, and then fire, water, and earth are the same. I struggled with that for a long time, you know, and it was confusing until I started working with it. And when I saw that the elements were placed in the same directions in multiple traditions, when I started working for them, I finally just conceded that that's all it was. It was just a different word for the same thing. Um, so while we're doing that, let's talk about the function. So the elements aren't just the actual elements like fire that burns and water that moistens. They are also how energy manifests in creation, and it has a function. And so these 5 functions also help to delineate how the universe manifests. So for that, I'm sure I have to have this down here somewhere. I'll have to look for it. But you have the 5. Oh, there it is. Is that it? So you have the 5 functions would be expanding, contracting, rising, falling, and centering, congealing. I don't know what word to use for that. And that corresponds with the elements ether expanding, air contracting, fire rising, water descending, earth congealing. So when you're dealing with the 5 elements, it's not just the building blocks of matter, it's also how everything functions. And so without that, this is again a building block of how the universe works. So here they are. Let's see if I think this is it right here. If you want to take notes, these are the notes. Take a screenshot of this. Okay, expanding, contracting, rising, falling, and centering. So these are the 5 elements. So again, if you're going to use this to teach, we're talking about the 5 elements. You know, this is really, like I said, this is to address the intellect. Westerners need to have their intellect stimulated before they can do something. Otherwise, they don't. You know, Westerners get uncomfortable if you just throw them straight into exercises. So, at that point, what I would do, if you're using this to teach, I would then go and teach them one of the exercises that I have in the playlist for working with the 5 elements. I'm not going to get into that in this because that's a whole other subject, and that's something I think you should work on and experience yourself. Since I'm teaching it over internet. But what I am going to do is I'm going to teach you something really specific and simple. And then when we do that, we're going to go talk a little bit more about how the 5 elements are placed into the thunder wheel, the medicine wheel. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about why I'm so adamant about their placement and why that needs to be part of the curriculum. Let me see if I can find it. What I'm looking for here is what's called the 5 element breaths. I do teach that in other places, but know that there are people who teach they call them 5 element sounds. But when you actually go to the original text that was written by Tao Hung Jing, one of the first Taoist monks, he actually gives you a very specific method, and it's not a sound. You don't voice them out loud. He calls them breaths, which means that you whisper them at such a low level that no sound comes out. Your vocal cords move and your mouth moves and the air comes out very slowly, and that is how you tap into the essence of the 5 elements. So if you've ever learned to do the 5 elements by making sound through your voice, and they call them 5 element sounds, that's very common, but that's not an accurate representation. And the reason why that's so important, not only because of the effectiveness of it, but also I found that that's how to chant the runes. One of the most powerful way to chant the runes is in that very same way, because the word rune means whisper. So it's telling you how to chant them, how to use them. In any case, let me see if I can find those 5 element breaths. where they are. I'm just going to have to go through my stuff here, so forgive me if I can't find it, but I think this might be it. So those are the 5 element breaths. You're going to find multiple ways of people giving you those 5 element breaths. These are the ones that work best for me. So if I were to do them out loud, which I'm not, but I'm doing it just for illustration purposes, the wood element or the ether element is shh. Okay? The fire element is ha. Wood, fire, earth is hool. Now that's the root where we get the hool breath. In this practice, again, if you're new to this channel, if you're new to all of this, one of the first things I want you to do is to practice the hool breath. And I've already shown you where to find that. But that's the first part of that. That's the Earth Mother Goddess Hulda. And that's where she gets that first part of her name, Hu. So, wood, fire, earth. Metal is wood, fire, earth, metal. And water is, you know, it's hard to do it. You have to write it like who. So you're asking yourself, what's the difference between who and who? Well, you actually make the wha sound. Like you're whistling. Now, again, you do this all without any sound. So this is something you're going to have to practice. What I've found is that if you can get air to exit the nostrils and the mouth at the same time, and that's not the easiest thing to do, but if you can get that to happen, that will force the breath to slow way down, and then you'll be able to engage the vocal cords and everything without actually making any sound come out. So if I were to do the fire sound, this is the way I would do it. So I know that may not do a whole heck of a lot for you, but what happens is when you let the breath come out like that, where it's coming out the nose and the mouth at the same time and not engaging the vocal cords, you immediately go into a trance. You immediately go into a state of altered state of consciousness. For me, what helps is, as you saw what I did, I keep the back of my neck straight, and I let my eyes go down, and I'm really kind of focusing here, and then I engage the breath that way. So now I'll do the earth breath the same way. And that one especially just puts me right off into the ethers. You know, we work so hard to get into that meditative state, but this is one of the, if not the fastest way to get into that state of emptiness. So I'm not going to go over that too much again here. I want you to practice that on your own. This is, again, for those of you who want to teach this, and you want to teach just an introduction to the 5 elements of the Thunder Path. This is for you to take and to teach. So once again, let me take a look at those 5 element breaths, see if I got everyone there, and practice this on your own. And I think I put it in the, there's 2 ways that I recommend that you do it. Let me see which one I put down here. This was a while ago. Okay, so I didn't put that in the order that I would have liked. There's a progression that's called a healing progression. I forget, a lot of people, there's a bunch of different names for it. But this is important. You have to do it in this progression, unless you get to a more advanced state, and only when you know what you're doing, otherwise you can cause problems for yourself. So what you want to do is you want to go ether, fire, earth, air, and water. Okay? Ether, fire, earth, air, water. That's the progression I want you to do it in. You can use one element, but if in doubt, you should do all 5 of them. Because if you do all 5 of them, they'll balance out. If you are unsure about that, then just do the earth, because the earth contains all of them. Ether releases all of them, earth contains all of them. Okay, so they're like pieces of bread in a sandwich. Ether releases all of the elements, and earth contains all of the elements. Okay, so I don't know why I did that for some other reason. I think it had to do with the chakras, something. I can't remember why I did it in that. This was again a long time ago that I did it that way. I put that together. So that's an exercise. So as I've done here, one of the first things I do is I put you into an exercise which will connect you to the energy. Because talking about it is really meaningless if you can't do anything about it. It's like talking about, bodybuilding. You want to become a bodybuilder, the last thing you want to do is go to Denny's and eat Grand Slams and talk about bodybuilding. You need to get in the gym and lift weights. Otherwise, all your talk is meaningless. So the same thing is true here. Talk is good. The intellect enjoys that. We need some instruction, but we have to get in there and do some work. So now I want to talk to you about the placement of the elements. We've talked a lot about that in other videos. And so now we're going to talk about the placement of the elements. And that is not up for negotiation. I know that a lot of people want to kind of debate that, but in my experience, the placement of the elements is the placement of the elements. So anyway, here they are in the thunder wheel. When you want to use this for ritual purposes, you need to know where the elements are in the thunder wheel. So as you remember, the thunder wheel energy moves in a clockwise fashion. So that will tell you one of the reasons why the elements have to be done in the order that I mentioned, because it comes in, you start at the east, start facing in the east with ether, and you work with ether, and then you turn clockwise and you move to the south and you work with fire. Now, earth is placed in the center, but another place that earth is perhaps even more strongly associated is in the southwest. So you would again continue clockwise to the southwest and you work with earth, continue to the west, work with air, and then move to the north and work with water. And that way you've worked all the way around in the thunder wheel. So when you're doing ritual, you can do those same breaths. Do the ether breath, do the fire breath, the earth, the air, and the water. And that way you've worked in a clockwise fashion with all of the elements. There are other ways to use them, but I'm not going to get into that here because that's a little more advanced. And again, all I want you to do is to be able to teach this in an introductory way. So there again, the placements of the 5 elements, and then we'll talk a little bit about their function, and you'll see it in the 5 elements as well. The placement, it'll make even more sense when you look at that. But once again, take a look at where they are. Okay, so we talked about how when the universe was created, we started with the first 2 elements, fire and water. And then we've got ether and air. Now, imagine yourself standing in the in the thunder wheel. Okay, this I want you to get an idea of how this will give you another understanding of how the energies work when you're in the thunder wheel. So we have two opposing energetic forces that are working, that are pushing and pulling against each other, and this creates a Celtic cross. Okay, we got up and down and then across the side, and that is why, by the way, why you see a lot of healers, whether they're priests or whomever, they wear some kind of a Celtic cross. So here we have the 8-sided, here we have the thunder wheel. These directions here, the Celtic cross, deal with balancing the 5 elements in the external realm. And in Chinese, actually, the character for shaman is just simply a Celtic cross. Whether they know it or not, what they're saying is that the shaman balances the 5 elements on the external. Now these diagonal branches here deal with the spiritual and the psychological. We're talking about the 5 elements today, so we're not going to get into that. So basically, when you just want to balance things on the external, you get rid of these 2 diagonal branches and you just work with the Celtic cross. That will balance things. That's why you see people, when they're blessing things, they go like this, right? Just different forms of making that cross, balancing the 5 elements. So remember how the function. So the function of fire and water, water descends, fire rises. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum. As it so happens, the northern direction is almost the deepest. Remember when I told you last time that the word north means left and under? Well, why would it mean under if you're facing east and you're left, what's left of you is north? Why would they call it under? Because under is where that world is. The mist world is under. And that's because water descends and fire rises. And again, if you look at the Chinese map, which I still have here, the south is at the top, remember? And that's because they're coming from a different perspective, where they're going from high to low. And so they turn it around so that south is at the top, which is where fire is. Fire rises, water descends. Now we go across the middle here. We got this branch right here, this middle here. And that's ether in the east and air in the west. And this is expansion and contraction. So ether always represents life force energy. I know a lot of Western practitioners don't know what to do with ether or spirit. They don't know where to place it. They get confused. It belongs in the east, because the east is the realm of expansion. It is the realm of the rising sun. It is the realm of Indra. It is the realm of thunder. It is where Thor is always fighting off the giants. And what are the giants? The giants are that expansive energy. And if it continues to expand, then it will, the balloon will burst. So Thor keeps that at bay. That's why he's there. He doesn't stop the expansiveness. He just keeps it at bay. And that has to do in the human body with the inhale, because the life force energy, doesn't matter what tradition you're talking about. At some point, the writing or the word will mean breath. Spirit, for example. Spirit means breath. Like when somebody expires, right? They out spirit. So we have inhalation and expansion of life force energy. So the breath, when you inhale, the chest expands, and that inhale of oxygen, of air, is also charging you with life force energy. Now that life force energy, if it continues to expand, you'll blow up. So we have to balance it. And so in the West we have air, which is contraction, and you release. You inhale and expand with ether, and then you exhale, you blow it out. The contraction of the lungs creates the air that comes out of you. So you have those two things balancing each other. So they're on a flat plane. Ether and air are on a flat plane. whereas water and fire are on this kind of a plane. Okay, so again, somebody got on my case because I should, putting things in a two-dimensional, the 9 worlds are not two-dimensional. I know that they're not two-dimensional, but you gotta put it in some form. I mean, we can make 3-dimensional models if you want, but looking at it, north is down, south is up, east and west are on a flat plane. When we're just looking at the 5 elements. So Earth can be placed either in the center or in the southwest. Now, in my experience, if you're doing some ritual where you're dealing directly in a deep level with the Earth element, or when you're dealing with the underworld, which is the deepest part of the Earth element, then facing southwest and doing the Hool breath posture. I can't show that here, but there's a standing posture for the Hool breath, which I teach in other videos. That is one of the best ways to deal with the Earth element. So even if you wanted to just stand or face the southwest and do the Hool breath, that would be a very powerful way of centering yourself. It also helps the unconscious mind. It puts the unconscious mind into order. So very cleansing, healing, and allows the unconscious mind to sort of relax and be ordered well. So I could go on and on about that, but we're only talking about the cardinal directions here in the 5 elements. So, all right, so what else do I want to talk about here? Function. We can talk about the elements and the organs and the elements and the emotions, because this is also part. So, you can look at it 2 ways. Again, the intellect, if you want to look at things on an intellectual level, you can work with the elements by working with the emotions and the properties that are connected to them, which will, just by doing that, will help to balance the organs. Or you can just work directly with the energies, and that will help balance the organs as well. Again, I'm seeing my live stream is kind of clicking on and off, so my apologies if the screen goes blank or whatever. So now we've got 8 people watching. Hi. So for those, I'm only seeing 2 people here have said something, 8 people watching. Again, if you're just coming on, this is for, it's probably a good idea to go back and watch this from the beginning after it archives. Because what we're doing is we're going over some basic information about the 5 elements. I'm not expecting you to memorize everything I'm saying here. Just giving you an outline of, if you wanted to teach an introductory course on the 5 elements, you could use this. But you're not stuck with this. There's I just created a 5 element playlist from a bunch of stuff. Watch that. Again, treat it like a university. Watch all this stuff and then, put it together in the way that you want. There's only a few things that I think that if I were to require, I would want you to do, which is to make sure that you teach the elements in the proper progression, which would be the healing or the constructive. There's another one which I call the cleansing. There's actually many ways to have the elements go together, but there's another one called the cleansing progression, which I don't want you to do necessarily right away, but that's for cleansing. That's for fighting negativity, fighting evil spirits. But it's also really good for cleansing. It's also very healing. Let me see if I got this little thing here which shows, I believe this shows the progression of the elements. I could be wrong, but let me take a look. I think it does. Starting on the upper left is where the wood is, which would be ether. If you follow this progression, which would be ether, fire, earth, air, and water. Wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, same thing. So take a look at that. So that's why I picked that. And if you're teaching a class, that you can take that same picture. That's a good little teaching thing, because again, as I said, energy goes in a clockwise fashion, and that has it set up in a clockwise fashion. As long as you start with wood, you can replace it with ether. you go in a clockwise fashion and do the elements in that progression, it's going to be it's going to help create and build energy. Okay, and that's the way it should be done in the beginning. But let me take it. I'm going to now just address your intellect again here for a little bit. But before I do that, I want to check and see if there are any questions. Again, thank you to those who are watching. I know it's a holiday. Let's see, we got 5 on there. Yeah, I don't see any questions, and that's okay. What happened to my thing? Where'd it go? This goes over here. No, that's right. No, come back here. Okay, so now I want to address your intellect again, just very briefly. And we're going to talk about the elements and the organs. So let me see if I have something here about the elements and the organs. Let me just go through all these and see what I do have. So let's see. There's... Okay, so I didn't put together a little picture for that. So we'll have to talk about it, and that's probably okay because, you know, this is more for healing. Like if you're going to do some shamanic healing, you're going to work with the elements. But we can talk about it very generally. So let's start with ether. Ether has a connection to the liver. And the liver is, you know, of course, one of the organs that detoxifies the body. But from a spiritual perspective, the liver has to do with nobility. I don't know how else to put it. You know, the ID, it's freedom and nobility. So when the liver is having problems, that is a good indication that the person is holding on to some resentment. I'm not talking about anger. That's something else. Flashes of anger, that can be the heart center. But it can also be the liver. But resentment, the word resentment means to re-feel. So, like I said, flashes of anger. You're driving down the street, somebody cuts you off, and you scream and you cuss at them, and then after a couple seconds you realize you're okay, you're not going to die, and you didn't get in an accident, and you calm down, and your blood pressure goes down. That's the normal. That's what anger is there for. Anger is there to defend you when you are threatened, when there is a threat to your safety. That's what anger does. But a resentment is when you hold on to something. You know, and we all have them. We all have them. You know, divorce, a lawsuit. You got fired from a job. You know, you asked somebody out on a date and they rejected you, or somebody looked at you funny. You're out there surfing and somebody stole your wave. That's one of my big ones. That's why I surf alone. So resentment is thinking about it, and I still do it. Listen, I've said so many times, if you're looking for perfection, I'm the wrong teacher, because I ain't it. I'm as human as they come. And it's not like I was going to say catch myself, but that makes it sound like, you know, it's such an unusual event. No, I still replay all my old stuff and, you know, letting go of it. But you have to let go of it. And what's interesting is that the sound for that is shh. And isn't that what we do, like when somebody's really upset? We go, shh, 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 calm down, it's okay. It's because we don't realize it, but we're actually intuitively trying to heal them, helping them, you know, release that resentment. So that's one of the things. If you're resentful, if you're angry and resentful at something that somebody did to you at work today and you're still thinking about it, do the wood breath. Do the ether breath. And that will help calm the liver down. It will help the liver, you know, actually help the liver relax and open and do its work. So it's like It's an open. It's like nobility. You know, nobility is allowing people to be who they are. You know, understanding that, you know, we're all doing our best here. We're all stumbling, and, you know, we're all doing our best. And so when you have enough sense within yourself that you're not threatened by other people's dysfunction, and you can, you know, let them have that, you know, and again, not in a codependent way, not in denial, not in the, oh, that's fine, I forgive and love everybody, love and light. Not that. I hate that. I'm talking about being enough within yourself that when somebody's in that, you just go, you know what? You think to yourself, it's tough. It's not, has nothing to do with me. It's on them. That's a sign of a strong ether element. Fire. Fire, generally speaking, has to do with the heart. And so when the fire element is not doing well, one of the things you can get is impatient. So that's why it's called flashes of anger. You know, that could be the heart center. Flashes of anger with the heart center. Let's see, ether, fire, wood, fire, earth. So we talked about that. The safest of all the elements is the hu. Hu. And that you already do. If you're doing the hul breath, which you should be doing, you're already doing tons of earth, because that's the earth goddess. There's no coincidence that the sound hu, or the breath hu, is the earth element, and that the name of perhaps one of the oldest earth goddesses in history is Hulda, or Hole. And in fact, there are some people that have speculated, I don't know how true it is, but I find it interesting at the very least that there's some scholars that have speculated that Hulda was like the original earth mother goddess in Europe for tens of thousands of years. But in any case, we have that sound, hu, and that's found in multiple places all over the world. The Sufi tradition does that. The Ekankar, I don't know if you're familiar with the Ekankar religion, they actually stole that. They call it Hu, but it's just some white person mispronouncing Hu, which was in the Sufi tradition, and it's also in the Sikh tradition. That's where they got it. They got it from the Sikhs. Ekankar is based on the Sikh tradition. That's why it's called Ekankar. Ekankar Satnam. Ekankar Satnam. Ekankar Satnam Wahe Guru. Ekankar Satnam Wahe Guru. That's a Sikh chant. They took it straight from the Sikhs, and then some guy created his own religion out of it. So that has to do. The earth has to do with the stomach and the spleen. And that, you know, when the earth element is out of balance, you will have a hard time comprehending life. Understanding and comprehending. One of my good friends, he was one of my senior students. You know, I won't mention his name. He knows I respect him and I'm grateful to him. He died of stomach cancer. He just couldn't comprehend things of the spirit. It vexed him. He couldn't comprehend it. When we were doing certain things, working with energy, there were times when he just, you know, he would say, how does that happen? He would try and figure it out physically. It vexed him. And then, you know, I'm sure that was just the tip of the iceberg. You know, that's how he interfaced with life, and it you know, potentially it perhaps killed him. And so the stomach is where we comprehend, where we digest. So when you're not digesting food, right, your body's not digesting food, perhaps, again, don't take this from a medical standpoint, I'm just talking, you know, for the intellect's sake, perhaps you're having a hard time comprehending life, comprehending things about life, digesting the things that are happening. So let's see, we've got, the next one would be air. So air obviously has to do with the lungs, because that's where we breathe. Now, when the air element is out of balance, we will have sadness, disappointment, and sadness. So somebody who has chronic lung issues, you know, whatever it is, you can be pretty sure at some point there's some sadness there, some sadness that has not been relieved, some deep sadness and some depression and misery has not been released. And then we have water. Water is kidneys, obviously. And the kidneys are an interesting one when we look at it from the modern perspective, because where do most people have generalized pain? In the lower back, which is where the kidneys are. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is people, I don't drink any coffee or caffeine because caffeine is just so hard on the adrenal glands, which sit right on top of the kidneys. So hard on them. That's why, by the way, martial artists and yogis wear these big sashes to keep the kidneys warm and the adrenal glands warm. So when we're out of balance there, it's because we don't feel supported. And what is the main, if you talk to people, especially, myself included, I know I've been there so many times. When somebody has back pain, first thing you should ask them is, how are your finances? Oh my gosh, I have so much debt. Oh yeah, I lost my job. How am I going to? They don't feel supported by the universe, because money to us is the main way that we feel the universe supports us and allows us to live. It's our lower, it supports us, our lower back. Oh, my back. Oh, I can't lift that. My back. It's because you don't feel supported. You don't feel the universe is supporting you. So that's why working with water is, water is nurturing. You don't feel nurtured. So, again, these are some other ways to be working with the 5 elements. So again, if even these concepts I'm talking about, you can face those directions. You can deal with the elements. You can deal with the planets. You can deal with the deities that are there. Just out of fun, let's take a look and see the planets. I think I have that here too. The planets that are connected with the 5 elements. I think this is that right here. Boy, that's a whole class right in itself. I could just launch into all of that for hours, talking about the planets and the deities connected with that. Anyway, this is just for your information to go over. So I think I've gotten everything that I wanted to talk about here, but here's the bottom line. Look, this video here tonight is about giving you permission and certifying you to give introductory classes in shamanism in these areas. The playlist is the important thing. Go and watch the playlist underneath and study those videos and the exercises that are in those videos. And you don't have to teach all of them. Again, if you want to teach and you are like me and you want to do it in your own way, study those materials and create your own curriculum from that. If you're not comfortable with that, you don't see yourself as a teacher, not a problem. Invite people over to your house and set up the YouTube playlist and just press play and then discuss it and or do the exercises together. I want you guys to feel free to create your own study groups or classes. I am giving you permission. You can use my name. Of course, when I have specific instructions, I suggest you stick with them. But I'm giving you a lot of carte blanche to do whatever you're comfortable with. So, yeah, I think the next one we'll talk about the 3 ones, and that should give you that'll be 5 classes. That'll be 5 areas of shamanism that you can use to, create, your own tradition if you want. I don't care. So let me do some business here, and then see if there's any questions or if I have anything else that I want to say. So let's do some business. Okay, hi, welcome back. Let me see. I did see a couple of questions here. Um, Sanctuary of Healing Therapies. May I ask what training and with whom you've trained? I think I did a whole video on that. Um, uh, but yeah, I did a whole video on what my background is and who I trained with. I've written about it a lot. So if you're really interested in that, you can look at it in my books or find it. I think there's one, Who is the Thunder Wizard, or something like that. I think I talk about that there. Let's see. Alicia Cole says hello. Holly Hobby Molly. It's an interesting name. Hello from Pennsylvania. Can't seem to get enough of your videos. Thank you. I appreciate that. Holly Hobby Molly then asks, do you have a book based on the 5 elements? I don't have a book just on the 5 elements, but I do talk about the 5 elements a lot. The one book that I, go into it, and the whole idea is I'm showing how the 5 elements are found in multiple traditions, specifically bolstering the idea that the Germanic traditions were operating from the same idea about the 5 elements, and that was this book here. So if you're interested in finding out how the 5 elements correspond all over the world, especially how it connects to the European tradition, you can read that book there, The Thunder Wizard Path. So I think that was the only... Is there another question I missed? Nope. People say hello. Saeed says greetings. Hi, Saeed. Okay, so I think that's it for today. How long have I been talking? I've been talking an hour. Gosh, time flies. All right, so keep your eye out next time. I guess very quickly I'll tell you where the elements are in connection to the chakras, which is very interesting when you start working with the purification progression. I call it the purification. I think the Taoists call it the insulting, which is kind of just weird. What do you mean insulting? You got the creative, and then you've got the destructive, and then you have the insulting. So, yeah, that's let's take a look here. So if you understand, once again, I didn't get into this, but the elements are also about density. Earth being the most dense, ether being the least dense. So if you start from the least to the most, you have ether, air, fire, water, and earth, which is the purification progression or the insulting progression. And that corresponds with energy as it's descending and getting more dense within the human body, right? You've got ether, air, and then fire is the navel, water is the sexual center, and earth, which is the perineum. So these are these 5 chakras. So when you chant Lam, Vam, Ram, Yam, Ham, you're going from most dense to least dense in terms of the chakras. So that's just a fun little note to meditate on. Again, keeps the intellect happy while you're doing the work. Okay, there's that. I think I'm all done. I gave you the information that there's a radio show some internet radio show that I'm going to be on July 6th. I already gave you the info there. So feel free to watch that. I think they'll even archive that, so if you can't listen to that, watch that. If you can't listen to that, I don't know, maybe it's a video podcast. I don't know. If you can't listen to that, I'm sure you can go on and watch it and or you can go and listen to it after it's been recorded and tell your friends about it. All right, so that's it. I know there's only a few on there, but all of you there, does anybody have any questions? Can you send an email reminder on your interview? Yes, I'll tell you how to do it right now. Email yourself with a reminder on the interview. No, that's why I do this. I put it up so that you can take notes. Sorry, I was having fun with myself there. I'm trying. See, here's what I'm trying to avoid. I don't like to work. So every time I'm writing something or emails, I don't like doing that. So that's why I come up here and I flash things on the screen. so that I don't have to do that kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah. If you email me, I'll rename Michelle, and only you rename Michelle. If you email me requesting the date and the time, I may respond back and give that to you. So A says, do you believe our birth names have significance? Now you're allowing me to now pitch myself for the Vedic astrological readings. Yes, I do believe that birth names have significance, but I think a lot of people have been given the wrong birth name. Here's the idea. Every syllable has a connection to a star constellation. And so just to give you an example, in fact, I did a Vedic reading not too long ago where somebody was very lucky in that the star constellation that lorded over their moon and their ascendant was the same. And these star constellations are chopped up into 4 sections, padas they're called. She had the same pada in the same nakshatra, star constellation, for both her ascendant and her name. She was really lucky. My parents were pretty lucky. I was pretty lucky, and my parents guessed right in terms of my ascendant, which is your physical body. Your ascendant connects to your physical body, and that is the sound ma. So anytime somebody calls me Michael, I'm empowered on a physical level. And the two of us, we were talking about it, and hers was too. Her parents came extremely close. The exact syllable we don't have in English, but the closest one in English was pa, and her name started with that. And we both kind of mused, well, maybe that's why, we still are healthy at our age, because every time somebody calls my name, it empowers me on a physical level. But the idea behind birth name, at least from the Vedic astrological perspective, is this. When you were born, your moon was in a very specific star constellation, and that star constellation is chopped up into 4 sections, so it's in a very specific section of a very specific star constellation, and there is a specific syllable that is attached to that. And so a Vedic astrologer will suggest at least the syllable, if not the whole name, to the parents based on where the moon is. And the reason why that is important is because the moon, the 2 most important things that Vedic astrologers, the first 2 things they're going to look at is first your ascendant, not your sun sign. That's what Western astrology does. They're going to look at your ascendant, then they're going to look at your moon, because those are the 2 things that change the quickest. The ascendant is changing every 15 minutes. I forget how often the moon changes. It changes very quickly. It's very fast. That means your mind is all over the place. So the moon is your mind and your emotions, not your intellect. That's Mercury. Your mind and your emotions. And so when you have somebody calling you with that syllable that's connected to the star constellation that is connected to your mind all the time, your mind will be stimulated. You will be drawn back to your mind, and your emotions will be brought to their highest level. That's why I said, yeah, it's very significant, and that's why some people have the wrong name. You could be called a name that actually stimulates something in your chart that's going to cause challenges for you. And then we can get into this discussion about why did the universe allow that, or why did you manifest that, which would obviously mean there was some challenging lesson that you wanted. So none of us are victims, but so if you want to know what your spiritual name, it's one of the services I offer in the Vedic astrological reading, is I'll tell you how to find your spiritual name, which is just how I finding the syllable for your moon nakshatra. And we can even take a look at where your name is and see where that is in your chart and what that's stimulating in you to see why your name does whatever it does. So, but if you want a spiritual name, I will give you that first syllable, and then you can create one yourself. And that, from then on, every time you use it, whether it's in ritual or whether as a nickname, or if you change your name to that, then you can start aligning your energy to your true spiritual name, which will help your mind operate and function well. So, Hope I answered your question. Thank you for the opportunity to plug one of my services. All right, so that's all I got now. Unless there's any other questions, I'll do some business here really quick. Give you guys a chance. If you have a question, you can ask it. If not, we'll just call it an evening. But let's just do a little bit of business first. Alrighty, so there it is. I'll check and see if there are any last minute questions. Nope, I don't see any. So looks like we're done for the evening then. Thank you, my friends, for coming on this 4th of July weekend. And so I don't have any pithy things to say other than, the five elements. The five elements were crucial for me in the beginning, and I'm talking about connecting to them physically and energetically. So I do recommend that you find a five element practice. There are all kinds out there, as long as it comes from a real tradition. I think you're safe working with mine. I've tested out everything that I do, and it's real stuff. So whether you do the five element breaths, or whether you work with the five elements and the directions, or whether, whatever, I think it's important to have that concept of the five elements and having an actual practice that you can use to connect with and balance yourself on that level. It's if you want to be a shaman, powerful shaman, it's going to be very important to be working with the five elements. At the very least, have an understanding of how to balance them. So that's it for now, my friends. Have a happy 4th of July, wherever you may be. And I think I'll do one more, which I think will be talking about the three selves, the three ones. And then you should have plenty of stuff to create your own curriculum and your own classes with. So that's it for now, my friends. May the power of the five elements be with you and balance you and keep you happy, sane, and safe this 4th of July.